Kia ora everyone, this is HR Chats with me, Terada, where we discuss all the many and varied things to do with HR. If there is anyone you would like us to chat to, any subject you would like us to talk about, feel free to get in touch with HR NZ and we will see what we can do. Today, Elizabeth Berryman. She began her career as a registered nurse and then went on to study medicine at Otago University. She's now an active researcher and an expert in mental health and psychological risks in the workplace. Pertinent, really, because this affected her. She had a personal experience of being bullied as a doctor and realised she wanted to end up in preventative mental health. Today, she's the founder and director of chnnl, a wholly digital platform providing insights, information and data on employee mental health and wellbeing. So we welcome to HR Chats with Terada, Elizabeth Berryman. Hello, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Radar. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Look, here's the thing that really staggers me. You know, research is a little bit varied, it is a little bit patchy, but it does indicate that New Zealand is one of the worst places in the world for workplace bullying and harassment. What's going on?
Yes, I know. Beautiful, beautiful Aotearoa. Sadly, he's got some horrific statistics. And a recent report that just came out this week, actually by BIE, highlighted the fact that we are, yes, in fact, one of the worst in the OECD. So that's really sad that, you know, we've got high rates of bullying and sexual harassment, with Māori and Pacifica affected more than Pākehā. And yeah, it's quite a concern.
Look, you look at this and you think, are we bad people, or are we more prone to report this kind of thing, and so we're higher than other countries? What do you think the situation
is? I
is?
think we're bad people. I just think that in our work environments, that sometimes there's some things that have been that way for a long time, go unchallenged, and that allows these bad behaviours to happen. And I think a lot of people even don't know that what their behaviour is in fact bullying. They think that they're being a good manager by running a tight ship. And so, yeah, they don't really understand the impact that they're having on their employees.
Look, you've got personal experience of this. I've seen you present at a previous HRNZ conference in one of those worlds that just seem to have institutional longevity of bullying practices, the world of medicine.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is my area of research. And so what we found is it's actually come from the fact that healthcare was in the army. So, for instance, that's why we're called house officers and medical officers of health, because we were actually in a rank in an army situation. Now, in the army, you're responding to crisis and you're responding to emergency situations. And so that's why a type of leadership, which is very dictatorship led, is important when you're in an emergency situation. However, healthcare has changed and we're no longer just reactive in an emergency situation. We're in a more of a everyday type of management style, and we haven't adapted. We haven't taught people how to be good managers, and we've just promoted people because, you know, they've been there the longest, or they're really high performers, and so we say, hey, you must be the manager now, and we give them very little training or support in those roles.
Does it have something to do with the kind of people that would get into medicine, for example? And you know that you often see they're quite alpha kinds of people. They're used to, they're the one, you know, whether I don't know whether some of them have that sort of superiority complex, or whether they feel the responsibility that if there is a mistake, it's their fault. I don't know.
Yeah. Personalities, yeah, absolutely. Like we select for it at medical school, right? You have to have the highest grades to get in, and so the people with the highest grades are the ones that can, you know, have low social skills sometimes. And so I think the medical schools have realised that and are starting to select for different types of personality with the medical school entrance. So yeah, you're right. There has been historically some personality issues, especially in the world of surgery. You know, there is all sorts of interesting personalities that come out there as well. So I think that's a very complex issue when you're looking under why and the causes of bullying and sexual harassment.
Yeah. In terms of you, as I say, I've seen you present your story. For people who haven't, do you want to take us on a quick sort of précis of how you ended up here?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I started off as a registered nurse, and then I went to medical school, and I experienced bullying at the hands of a surgeon. I didn't know it was bullying at the time. I just thought that I wasn't good enough. I was being yelled at. He would throw scalpels across the room. In hindsight, I'm like, that is so inappropriate.
It's sort of a make his own work thing, isn't it? If he throws a scalpel and you get injured, then he's got to fix you up, and it's like a self-perpetuating. It doesn't seem safe at the best of times.
No. And so I was in this environment, and everybody was so scared of him that it was just, there was no culture of speaking up. And I actually thought that I was a bad student. So I went to the dean of the medical school and I said, look, I'm really not doing well. I'm having panic attacks. I'm not sleeping. I would call myself a resilient individual. And yet I'm just being reduced to a shell of my former self. And he just laughed at me. And he said, Liz, it's not you. It's this particular person. And I said, well, why don't you do something about that? And he goes, well, we can't. So then I was like, well, that's not good enough. So we started doing research into exactly what is going on in our institutions. And we surveyed all of the medical students in New Zealand, and we found that 54% had experienced bullying, sexual harassment, or discrimination in the past year. And at that time, that was like 2015. It was quite a large thing to come out to say to the media that this was happening. Since then, it seems that you can't open a newspaper and not read about a statistic like that. And so we were kind of on that first wave of advocacy around this. And so I started doing more research. We put together a research group around how we can actually start to make a difference and improve this. And there are things we can do. There's some positive news here.
This is a good news story.
This is a good news story. There is lots of things that we can do to help improve our workplace environments, increase psychological safety, and help people who may be exhibiting bullying behaviours and not even know that they are, to get help so that they can be better people managers.
Look, I want to reference something that you've just mentioned then, and you mentioned at the start of that little story, is that you didn't know that you were being bullied. You never put it down. And actually, I'm just looking at some of the stuff from the MB report that's coming up. They're having that kind of big survey, and they're saying, in I think clause 28 or whatever it is, bullying is not defined in any New Zealand legislation. However, WorkSafe has a definition that's been considered by the ERA and the Employment Court when investigating claims, and so workplace bullying, they've got quite a nice list of what it is, and a list of specifically sort of what it isn't. So what have we got? What is bullying? It's repeated and unreasonable behaviour directed towards a worker or group of workers that can lead to physical or psychological harm when the repeated behaviour is persistent. Unreasonable behaviour means actions that a reasonable person in the same circumstance would see as unreasonable, and includes victimising, humiliating, intimidating, or threatening a person. Those all seem pretty clear, but I suppose it can be a little hazy sometimes.
Absolutely. So the area that I work in, I'm now a qualified doctor, so I'm training in psychiatry, and what we find is that there's a huge impact on people's mental health, and it's not just from the yelling and the throwing of the scalpel, which you can say, well, that's pretty blatant. That comes under that definition of bullying, where they yell at you on a consistent basis, and that it's targeted to one person, not to everybody. But what the research shows is there is another case called Incivility. Now, incivility is all that sarcastic things that are said. Oh, I'm just joking, but you know that they're not joking. And it's the eye rolling, it's the exclusion, it's not saying good morning when you walk onto the ward or into your workplace. Those things have just as much effect on your mental health as the big bullying incidents.
That's right. And as you say, it's not only the effect on your mental health. Then for those people who are in that situation, who are being bullied, that effect goes out into their family, their whānau, their community, not only the workplace. And then they run into issues of, what do I do? Do I raise a raise a fuss, or do I just leave? Why should they leave? You know, but sometimes, and then if they do leave, there's job insecurity. So there's a huge number of things tied up with this.
It's a huge, huge area. And that's actually why we got into Channel, which is the social enterprise that we've started as a result of this research and as a result of my experience. So what we found is that there was no safe place for people to speak up without making a formal complaint, going to HR and doing that whole investigation. You know, and it's really hard when it comes down to incivility. You're not going to go and make a complaint and say, Sally rolled her eyes at me in the meeting. You know, there's like no substance to that. But we know that it erodes culture, it makes the team not feel safe, and it means that people have an effect on their mental health. So we do need to deal with it, but it's so difficult. There's this whole legal implications that come with it as well. So what we need to do is we need to have a way that people can have a safe channel to say, these things happening to me, I'm feeling like this in my workplace, I'd like it to change, but I don't want to be named. And I don't want it to go any further, but I think my manager, and I think actually the board and the CEO would like to know what's happening on the front line, on the shop floor.
What happens? We've got, you know, most of our businesses in many ways are small to medium enterprises. They may not have an HR person. They may not have a board. It could be you in an office. And for goodness sake, we've seen this in parliamentary services. We've had examples, you know, of people being terribly victimised, terribly bullied in a parliamentarian's electorate office.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens in situations where people feel, I mean, they could go to parliamentary services, but if you're in a small office, accounting firm, a building firm, what do people do in that circumstance?
It's incredibly difficult, Radar. Like, where do they go? There is no safe space for them. And so they just end up usually leaving the job. And so you have high turnover rate. Or they just suck it up and suffer. And then we notice that their productivity goes down, and we're wondering, why are these teams not high functioning? Because there's all these subtle things going on in their workplace, and they've got no way to be able to seek help for that. And so that's why it's important with what we've done with Channel, is it's an app that people can have on their phone, and they can have that anywhere. You could be in Invercargill, you could be in Kaikoura, and you could put that through, and that would go through to the parliamentary services, say, or up to head office, where there might be more people who could actually take action on what's happening. What we found with COVID is that there's a lot of people now remote working. And so more and more people are feeling isolated. Instead of being able to pop into your manager's office and say, hey, actually, so-and-so made me feel a bit crap yesterday. That's not happening anymore because we're in a remote world. You can't just say, oh, hey, so-and-so was mean to me on Slack. So yeah, I think this whole new world of remote working and supporting people's psychological well-being when it comes to bullying is going to be really hard.
You've actually preempted my next question, or which was around, you know, where is a workplace? Because it's not just the physical workplace; it's any place where work can be, you know, performed. So that includes online, and particularly now that we've got people working remotely. You know, this work goes into the world of, I guess, you know, cyberbullying, exclusion if there are, I guess, events and things happening and they're not invited into them. It's all those little things as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's the thing, is like, it's hard to go, oh, there's so many things that we need to be measuring and monitoring. How do we do that? Well, what we found with our research is just keep it nice and open. Just ask people, what did you experience today? And they'll tell you. They'll tell you that they've got financial stress. They'll tell you that they've had this cyberbullying experience, that they've been phished by this email, and now they feel terrible that they've let this virus into the company. So there's so many different things that can go on, and you don't need to know it all. You just need to be open to listening to what the people have to say.
Sexual harassment. So, do they fit into the same category, or are they two different things? Is sexual harassment, I suppose, in a way, is a form of bullying, but at an entirely different kind of level.
Yes, yeah, we do keep them separate. And when we work with organisations, we do a policy review with them before we put in Channel. And we do make sure that they have a separate sexual harassment policy. It does have a different approach to how you work with the accused or the victim. Yeah, we need to take that in a different approach than we do with the standard bullying or discrimination.
Does Channel take care of that as well? Is it sort of a, you know, they can put it into there, or does Channel sort of really just look at the bullying?
There's the journal, so they can have a free text journal where they can say, you know, my cat got run over today, I feel sad. Or there's a Speak Up portal. So they can go into the Speak Up, they can log a time and a date, and they can say, this happened to me at this time and place, and they can choose to keep that for their own personal record, or they can choose to share it. And when they share it, it's actually shared anonymously with the organisation. We then come back to the person and say, if you would like to make a formal complaint, this is the process. Here's a peer supporter that you could talk to about that. And here is the context for how you can proceed and what a typical investigation would look like. And so that gives people support, because I think they're really worried about what's going to happen. They've never done this before. They haven't really heard of anybody else going through this process. And so the more information we can give people, then they can make decisions for themselves. And it's great to have an app that's anonymous, that gives it to them without them having to even name themselves.
Absolutely. And again, just, one of those things is the importance of noting down all of the little things that happen. I have been on the board of a couple of organisations in the arts world, and one of the best things I saw came from a theatre in England, and this was specifically, it was to do with bullying, but more so with sort of this sexual harassment side of things. And they said, report everything, even if you don't want it taken further, even if you don't feel it's prosecutable, because what it does, if you say, hey, look, this person is making me uncomfortable, they've said something inappropriate, what it does is then build up a pattern, so that when someone does come forward and go, hey, look, this has happened to me, rather than there being nothing there, they can go, well, actually, yeah, this person's got a real long list of kind of dodgy behavior, none of which has been enough to sort of do anything. So, I mean, that ability to write everything down in a place, or just to report to somebody that this is going on, is really crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then what we find as well is, because we go into an organisation and everybody has channel, is that you start to see themes coming up across different people. So, for instance, you might get one little speak up notification in January, and it might be from, say, a doctor, and then you might get a notification in June from a nurse, and then you start to see this pattern. And over time, you can look back and you go, oh, this person's actually had 9 speak up events happen over this time. Maybe we should go and check in with them and see if there's anything we can do to support them. And so you don't have to take it any further. You can't actually use the speak up information that people have put in a formal way, but it allows the organisation to know where hotspots are, where they can put more resources into support people.
Yeah. Because the data, this is a great thing, so that, the data doesn't always tell the story. We can look at the number of complaints, but it doesn't necessarily tell us how many instances of harassment or bullying at work. And actually, these can change over time as well, can't they? We saw with the Me Too movement coming through, suddenly there was a lot of people who were speaking up publicly. Many of them had spoken amongst their peers, and we saw this. And I know in some of the industries I'm in, there's an unofficial channels of people talking amongst themselves all the time. But finally, because of the courage of a few people to stand up, other people said, yeah, actually, that happened to me as well. So we see sort of shifts, not only when things are reported and how they're reported, but also the social awareness of changing norms as well. So things that might not have been considered, for example, in medicine, what happened to you was, that's just what it's like. But as we realize it shouldn't be like that, all of those little things change as well. Have you seen a big move towards a lot more reporting in certain areas?
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting, because now if we don't have somewhere for people to have a safe channel to tell these stories, they'll actually go to the media now. And that's a massive PR issue for a lot of organisations. Like, I could name a few law companies in New Zealand recently who've had a situation. That's a massive deal for someone. And if they had a safe place where people were taking these reports seriously and supporting people with that, then they would not need to go to the media, and you reduce that risk of PR damage.
Yeah. And often it can be that an organisation simply doesn't have a structure. And again, I was in an industry where we thought we had a structure. We thought we had places to come to. And it turns out we absolutely didn't, because of the nature of the industry. There was it's freelancers and contractors. What about freelancers and contractors? They often exist in a world in and of themselves. If something happens to them, then there's no one to kind of report to.
No, and they're not really, especially it's hard when you've got a contractor who may be a bully, because then it's hard to also support that person with that behaviour when they're a contractor as well. So Yeah, it's a very complex issue, but that's why it's so great to have technology. We can leverage technology and support people who might be remotely, or if they work as a contractor, they could just download an app and say, look, for the 3 months I'm here, I'll use the app, and then I'll get out of the app and away we go. So there, that's what's so great about being in 2020, is that there is all these tools available now.
Yeah. And yet, even though we are, in 2020, bless it, what a year, what a great year. Look, there's still similar kinds of people experiencing bullying. I'm looking again at the MB report, so Māori and Pacifica are more likely actually to report instances of bullying because there is a higher level of bullying, or because they've simply gone, you know what, stuff this, I am sick of this. And so there's a real cultural drive to continue to report. Likewise, trans and binary, migrants, young people. Often we probably exclude the fact that, young people aren't bullied. They're just being taught to toughen up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really fascinating, and I would recommend people reading that report that we're talking about today. It's really a no-brainer that women and minority groups do experience the highest levels, and that's historic. You've got the men who do the mansplaining and the other things as well that goes on in the workplace. And I think as women are coming more and more into the workplace and into higher positions, we're going to start seeing us reporting and saying, actually, no, enough's enough. We know that that's actually below the line, and we'd like to keep things professional as possible, so we're not going to take it anymore. Yeah.
Look, even likewise, it points out, experiences of people with disabilities, decisions that exclude employers with disabilities from workplace events due to physically inaccessible venues is an example of practices that cause humiliation as described in the Human Rights Act. So, again, all of that low level stuff, almost in a way, it's low level, it's low hanging fruit. It's easy to identify once you're aware of it, I suppose. A lot of people just not aware of it.
Exactly. And that's what the CEOs and boards have been telling me. They're like, we don't know what's going on the front line, especially if you've got 10,000 staff. How are you supposed to know what's going on for Jimmy in the psychiatry ward, who's working day to day as a cleaner? You're not going to know those kind of issues that actually he can't get access to the things that he needs to do his job. So that's why it's so great, again, coming back to that, leveraging technology to be able to support people to be the best and the most productive they can be at work.
Look, here I am. I'm sitting here. I'm the financial person, and someone's coming into me from HR and saying, we want to install this technology. We want to sort it out. We want to have a platform. We want to spend some money on training, diversity, inclusion, all of that kind of thing. Wellness initiatives. If I'm the finance person, how do I go, oh, look, times are tight. What's my return on this? How do I measure this?
Well, it's very hard to measure performance, as most of these HR professionals and listening to this webinar will know. That's very difficult to measure productivity and performance. But what we can do is we can ask people, how productive do you feel today? And what the literature shows is that is actually a really great measure to be able to see actually how productive people are, is a self-reported measure of productivity. So we ask that in the app. So we asked 5 questions around the WHO-5 wellbeing score. So that gives us a 90% accuracy on detecting anxiety and depression. So we measure the mental health part of it. Then the next part, we measured the productivity part. And then we also report on those things that people are talking about in their journal entries and submitting through the Speak Up portal. So all of that comes into a dashboard, which is live, and you print out board reports. So Mr. CFO sitting there will get his board report and he'll be like, great, I've got numbers. It's finally for the first time we've got quantitative numbers to be able to measure and track this. So we can say, actually, our June was better than last June. And what are we doing to move the number on this? And then they can also start to track the revenue. So he's going to have in his board report, his health and safety report, the channel report, and then it goes into revenue and P&Ls. So they'll be able to draw a correlation and see, actually, is it moving the bottom line? And what we found is that the organizations that do implement, I think Unilever in the US has shown that they have a $3 return for every $1 spent in wellbeing. And so for some organizations, that has increased their revenue by 14% just by supporting people's mental wellbeing. So there is a business case to go to Mr. CFO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
superb.
Oh, Mrs.
What about?
Sorry, listen to me. That's my unconscious bias right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it is. We've all got it. Look, we've all got it. Hey, look, likewise, we often don't compliment people enough. So within that kind of structure as well, I suppose there's also then that ability to say, hey, look, Susan did this really nice thing for me today. And I just wanted to note down that she didn't have to do this. This was a thing that occurred. That's important too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's those kind of things that come through in those board reports is that we have the positive promoters of wellbeing. That's actually the top line in our executive summary. And then the one is the negative detractors from wellbeing. And so we list those themes that are coming out in the journal entries. But that's why we always have the positive ones at the top, because it's really important. If you've got a high performing team, go find out what they're doing. What are you guys doing that's different? How can we clone you? How can we get you to go across our whole organization? Tell us what you're doing.
Have you seen a change in the last kind of 6 months with COVID, with quarantine? We've done a number of these podcasts. We've done a couple of online symposiums. There's been a huge drive, or a huge focus in HR on overall wellness and extending out into sort of whānau as well. Have you noticed a change in the bullying, harassment sort of sphere?
Not so much in the bullying and harassment sphere. What we found is that as soon as lockdown happened, we got inundated with people from across Australia and New Zealand saying, we need a remote way to be able to measure what's happening for our staff, and so we can support them better. We have no idea what they're going through. We think that they're having financial problems, but are they really? And so we were able to track people during lockdown, which was really interesting. And what we found, things were around sleeping. Staff weren't sleeping. It was really, really anxiety-provoking time. And so we were able to say, look, why don't we just do some simple interventions around improving sleep quality, some tips around staying off social media late at night, all those kind of little things that, we were able to respond in real time to what people were going through. You're
talking to me there, Elizabeth. And again, and we've seen this with school kids and people at work. Bullying, you used to go home about to shut the door and it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was there, but it was outside the door. You were at home, and now you're in bed and you're under the covers and you're looking at the phone and it's right there. You're in this field. What do people do about that? Perhaps if we go a little bit broader, even if they've got some kids or young people or friends who are being cyberbullied, or it's pursuing them into their lives. And we see a lot of that. In fact, there's been a couple of cases this week, revenge porn, cyber harassment. What's the story there?
Yes, it's all coming down to the power. So a lot of the bullying comes down to hierarchical power structures. And so one person feels like they have power over another person, and they go out of their way to make that person feel that they are less than the other person. So same when it goes online. And it's just awful to see that people who would normally have a filter in real life just don't have that filter online. And they say things that are so destructive. And it's something that we really need to take seriously. It's becoming more and more of a problem. TikTok and all these new social media channels, it's so hard to moderate a lot of these new platforms. So yeah, I think this is an area that I'd love to do more research in, Radar.
Yeah, look, I know I've had to go. I tried to quit. It just makes me so angry. You go on, and now here's because, and this is, I think this is pertinent for right now. An election is coming up. The world is in crisis. People are stressed out. There is a range of beliefs across the spectrum of credibility. What happens now? Are we in for more bullying, more harassment? Because now people are a little more polarized. We've got the anxiety and the stress of COVID. There are people who believe that the lockdown should happen, lockdown shouldn't happen. COVID doesn't exist. You've got all of this spectrum. Sorry? Therapy?
Conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories. Look, I was looking at one just this morning thinking, so what happens then when people come back into the workplace? How do you negotiate your way through quite often diametrically opposed, because we're very partisan now. You know, you used to be able to, what was the famous Baxter poem, Labour Dad and National Mum,
Yes.
you know, but not now. It just seems that people are more polarized. Does that mean more awareness should be paid to how this takes form in the workplace?
Yes. Sorry, you've got me triggered on that James K. Baxter.
Yeah.
You know, in that poem, it talks about incivility. He will get no sugar in his tea because of.
That's right.
Yes. And so it might be actually these subtle behaviors that are really hard to measure, that, you know, someone's actually undermining what you're doing at work, and it's very hard to measure that. So perhaps it'll be like that it'll be, you know, really minor things that are really hard to put your finger on, or it might actually be the big things. People are stressed. And so when people are stressed, they have very little emotional regulation. So they might be really explosive, and they'll be, you know, just snap at anything. So you might be seeing a lot of that coming through. We might also see people's resilience start to drop. So actually taking more mental health days is really going to be important. Being kind to each other. I know that's been said a million times in 2020, but I think even more so when we're talking about the fourth wave of COVID, which is this, you know, economic recovery that we're going to have to go through. People are going to be really suffering out there. And so we need to be aware that if someone does snap at you, it's maybe not about you. Maybe it's they've got lots of issues at home going on. And so their level of resilience is just a little bit lower at the moment.
So actually having a way of measuring these actions, you can actually start to quite perhaps almost preemptively see that someone is behaving out of character. And so it's important then maybe also to note if someone is behaving out of character. It's to note that down and go, oh, look, so-and-so snapped at me and then snapped again, or there is a sort of a mounting sense of incivility, harassment, workplace bullying, because that will allow you to get in there straight away and think, look, something's not right here. And people are stressed, you know, and it could be
And also, you know, from my background as a medical doctor, sometimes there's some medical things going on. You know, sometimes people they're depressed themselves. You know, so we do need to look at both sides of the equation when it comes to working out what is really going on in these complex situations. But it's really important that we keep psychological safety as our main thing going forward. How can we protect our staff to work at the best that they possibly can? And if we need to invest some money into wellbeing strategies and ways to monitor what's going on, then this is the hard stuff that we're going to have to do 2020 and beyond.
For those of us who aren't directly involved in this kind of thing, we're bystanders. Bystanders are important too, aren't they? Whether they're in the workplace or even socially, the power of the bystander.
Yes, okay. I could go on a massive segue here around bystanders.
That was why I prompted you, because I thought you probably could, because I think this is important just generally, because a lot of the stuff won't just be happening in your workplace. You may see it happening in someone else's workplace, in a supermarket checkout line, you know, for some poor security guard, bus drivers.
Yes.
Who, you know, have to, so in the wider world, I guess the HR world of the actual world, what's our power as bystanders in a way in terms of this? You must have some views on that.
Yes, absolutely. So there's the whole rhetoric around the bystanders need to be upstanders, and if you don't report, if you see things, then you're actually just as bad as the bully and things like that. Now, take the situation that I was in a very hierarchical situation when you've got senior surgeon, we've got that whole team, registrars, house officers, medical students, and that whole team. And it's super hard to be able to call it out. There are so many complex issues around why people can't speak up in that situation or ever. For instance, the registrars are trying to get a good recommendation so that they can go on and become a surgeon themselves. And so that's dubbed career suicide if you were to stand up and actually speak out against things. And so that's why it doesn't really work when you ask people to do that. The other thing is around patients. Now, we know that, or a customer, for instance, if you see someone who's been mistreated in the workplace, you're not going to go back to that place. You're going to go, actually, that's given me a bad feeling. I'm not going to go back to that supermarket. I'm not going to go back to that service station. And so you're losing customers by not allowing people to speak up. So yeah, it's really, really tough, but it's an important thing for us to contribute to the overall picture of what's happening.
Yeah. Just finally, are we getting better?
Are we getting better?
Are you optimistic?
I am optimistic. I am. I think that there is this point in time where everyone is suddenly realizing that mental health and safety is just as important as physical health and safety. You know, we have OC health teams, we have health and safety officers, but we have very little wellbeing safety officers in our organisations. And I think in the future going forward that there's going to be a whole lot more emphasis put on this part of the workforce. And I just can't believe that we haven't done this before. You know, when you look at the numbers, when you see the return on investment for wellbeing initiatives, you know, it's a no-brainer. I don't know why we haven't done it before, but I think that time is up and it's changing. So yes, I am very positive, Radar.
Good. I just was thinking then, you know, you say, you know, those mental health days. Should a mental health day, I don't really know. Can a mental health day be taken as like a sick day? Where you just go, you know what, I just can't go in. I'm going to take a sick day. And can people do that?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So some of the older school thinking is around you have to get a doctor's certificate to have a sick day. So as a medical doctor, we're very happy to sign off people to have days off if they need it for their mental well-being. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Good work. Yeah. Nice one. Finally, how are you doing? You've been through a lot. And here you are, you know, you've come through the other side, empowered and making sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen to you.
Yeah.
Sorry, to other people.
I don't know if you know or not, Rita, but I actually just had my second child 4 weeks ago.
Well, congratulations. Was it a lockdown baby?
Just between the lockdowns. So
good timing.
Nice, because I had him, and then we had a couple of visitors, and then we went into the lockdown in Auckland, and it was quite nice just to have our core family at home. Yeah. Yeah,
that is nice. And that is one of those things that, of course, you know, if you are in a workplace and you're out, bringing it back into a situation like that, it can just, you know, if you're being bullied, harassed, it's just so disruptive. Well, congratulations. That is nice. Little bundle of joy there to give you that kind of focus. And people do need that focus, don't they? You know, when we're talking around, particularly at the moment, everything's so sort of, you know, people need, I'm finding a lot of people are kind of stressed and depressed because they don't seem to have a focus. They might be not laid off, but, you know, they might be at home, or they might not know what work is doing. How important is it to find something to have outside of work to keep you going?
Absolutely. So we need to give people a sense of control back in their lives. When everything's uncertain and everything cancelled, and, you know, things are going on with the economy, we need to give people a sense of control. One way you can do that is giving people a project. So you can say, look, this is your project to work on. You can take full autonomy on that. And so people can really focus and go, yep, this is something that I have certainty in. And it gives them a sense of an anchoring and enables them to feel better about other things that they can't control right now.
Yeah. Also, so go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, a lot of people have made like travel plans. They were planning to buy a house. All these things are now on hold or cancelled. And I think people need new goals, you know, like, hey, why don't you learn a new language? Why don't you go to night school class and learn a new hobby or a skill? So giving people new things to focus on when they've had travel and other things cancelled. And, you know, people are grieving. It's a bit of grief when you've said, I'm going to go traveling for a whole year and then it's cancelled. So we need to take time for that as well.
Yeah. And I think understanding, you know, I've got friends whose kids are in high school. They're missing their school ball. They've finally got into the rowing. They're missing the big rowing. So, you know, and I guess it's important to look at your families as well, and all those little things that are big things in the scheme of things for those people's years. Is there a way that people can take the lessons, the learning, the technology from your world of HR and bring it into their personal lives to make sure that things are okay in their families?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Rada. Absolutely. I can't not take my work home with me. I get my husband to try out the app and I say, hey, give me feedback. So yeah, I think he feels like he's a part of this project that I'm working on, and it gives him a sense of enjoyment as well. So yeah, I don't know about that. We also talk about work-life boundaries. I
was kind of just thinking, I was thinking more of, you know, I was thinking sort of more of almost having a sort of reporting system in the family, you know, whether that's around the dinner table, because that's an increasingly rare kind of thing, or actually where, you know, you have a gratitude journal or some kind of book where people write down something, you know, you or the kids might write down, actually, today this thing happened, and you sit down and attempt to have a calm and rational look at it over the end of the week just to see how your family is tracking. I don't know if that would work.
What you're talking about is reflection, which is really,
Yes.
really important. To stop, take a moment, sit, and think about what's going on in your life. We don't do that nearly as much. If we go to the beach, we might sit there on our phone flicking through Instagram, whereas previously we might sit there and look at the beach and go, wow, what's happened to my life, and reevaluate things and do some mindfulness. It's just too easy to pick up your phone. So
Yeah.
Put that phone away.
And sit in a beautiful place or a beautiful cafe and look at other people's photos of beautiful places and beautiful meals. What have we become?
At least there's no travel photos.
At least there's no travel photos.
Yeah.
No, I'm in that travel / house buying boat, and I think a lot of people are, aren't they? Where suddenly, and that's the thing that gets me. Those plans that people had at this point in time, those plans have been sort of taken away, COVID-wise, economically wise. There is that state of flux. So paying attention to sort of the manifestation of that through those kind of behavioral patterns, bullying, harassment, taking it out on other people when actually it's that person. So I think let's watch out for other people. Maybe people doing that. A sign we should step in, help them out. All right. You've probably got a baby to get back to at some point.
I do.
You do, yeah, because they can.
So this is great.
they can only sleep for so long. Elizabeth Berryman, thank you very much. As I say, I saw you present at one of the HR NZ conferences, and it was a wonderful presentation. And now you'll work with Channel. Any final thoughts before we go?
No, just thank you very much to everybody who's been working so hard. I know that HR is one of the industries that has had to work very hard in the last few months. Difficult decisions around structuring and things like that as well. So take time to support your own mental health, and you can't help other people unless you're doing well yourself. So make sure that you're having some time for self-care as well.
That is an excellent final thought. What a great, you can't help other people unless you're taking care of yourself. Marvelous chatting on HR Chats with Elizabeth Berryman. If there is anyone or anything you want us to talk about, as we have said, by all means, get in touch with HRNZ and let us know. We will see what we can do. But from me for now, that's all. Take care, especially of yourself. See you later.